how many game designers are involved in a single game?
I say the best way to check is to pull up your favorite game and load up the credits and just see how many game designers there are, because some games have a lot.
Hello, and welcome again to the Pathways podcast, where we explore different careers in the Quebec City region. I'm your host, Susanna Tang from Voice of English-Speaking Quebec. Today, I'll be speaking with Victor Cameron about his experience working as a video game designer. He currently works at Ubisoft Quebec and was recently promoted to Associate Game Design Director. Victor is a member of the team that brought you Immortals Fenyx Rising. Here we go. When did you know that you wanted to be a game designer?
I remember when I was quite young, I want to say 12 or something. I had a friend who was also really into video games at the time. And so what we would do is we actually would make our own little video game magazines. We would come up with our own game ideas, and we would just put little previews of them, or we would draw some maps of what the levels would be, or review quote unquote each other's games. Clearly I was into doing the idea of game design then. But it was actually, I think for me, there were two kind of games that I played that really hit me hard. It was The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, which was on the Super Nintendo. It came out in 1992. And then Secret of Mana, which came out the next year. They were kind of the first game experiences I'd played that were immersive. So they were atmospheric. They had really nice kind of background sounds, or a really nice world. It was very lush. And it's almost like you would play it and you'd be like, man, I wish I was there. And that kind of really, something in my mind for that just kind of clicked. And I was like, I want to do this. I want to make these. At the time, I want to make worlds that people will lose themselves in. That eventually kind of transitioned to more I want experiences that people can lose themselves in.
Not sure about what you want to do in the future? Take a page from Victor and start with your childhood hobbies and interests. Is there a way to turn that passion into a career? Next, I ask him to explain what a game designer does.
You think about a board game. A game designer is the type of person who comes up with the rule set for that board game. From a high level standpoint, we are the ones who basically come up with and try to implement the rules of the game, whether that be how a character moves, how an enemy reacts, the space that the character moves through, i.e. level design, character design, enemy design. You're trying to basically conceptualize and implement rules into this game in order for the player to kind of have an experience that you've kind of crafted. Something can't be in the game without you having designed the rules for it. So you have to be aware of all the rule sets, whether that be super minor, like how does grass react to fire? Does it interact? Does it not? Stuff like that. There's a split between game design. You have what's generally considered called paper design, where it's you're creating documents and chart Excel files, and where it's you're working in the conceptual phase. And then you've got the implementation side, where you're taking features or tools that programmers have created, and you're taking asset art or animation or character rig that the artists and animators have done. And then you are kind of using that tool set to kind of get the result that you want. You don't always have the opportunity to do that because maybe the tech is too complex. So that's why you have a programmer who helps you out. So a good game designer has to be able to kind of flip between them and, oh, we need this new feature, or we need to change this feature. Well, you got to go quickly back to the paper side, make changes or update or write a new doc, and then flip back over to the making side of things. At UB, where I am right now, Ubisoft Quebec, it's a really good balance. I like it a lot. I definitely feel like I have a lot of agency as a game designer to kind of implement stuff, and I have a team behind me to help me if I can't do stuff. So it's really good.
So what is the best game that you've worked on and why?
I think I'm the most proud of the current game, Immortals Fenyx Rising. I worked on the fight system, the player combat system. It represents a turning point for my ability to do technical work. For a lot of my career, I was more in paper design, but it's really only useful for pre-production. Once you move into actual production, that type of skill is not as useful. And I just kind of had never embraced the opportunity to get more hands-on and get my hands dirty at making stuff. I've been in the industry a long time, and so that was definitely a skill set that I needed to learn more of. In fact, I remember several studios ago, they asked me, where do you feel you're weak? And I said, I feel like I'm weak technically, but I want to improve that. I want the opportunity to get better at it. And unfortunately, just didn't get as much of that as I wanted to. I did get some, but not as much. But up this most recent project, I really felt like I hit my stride when it came to that. And, a lot of the previews have called out the combat system as a positive of the titles. So I'm very proud of what I personally was able to bring to the project. I mean, I'm proud of the game in general, but I'm also proud of that the company trusted me enough to put me in charge of the fight system, and then proud of my ability to step up for that.
Another great takeaway: being good at your job doesn't happen overnight. You have to continuously work at it and seek out opportunities to learn new skills. Moving along, I'd like to know how Victor organizes his workday.
Well, first thing you do is you look at your meeting. You look at what meetings do I have today? A lot of the time, especially when you're in the kind of like the middle of it, you have a lot of meetings. You often have a scrum meeting, which is supposed to be small, really fast meetings where everybody just says like what they did yesterday, what they're going to do today, and flag any issues that potentially they can see. But the whole thing is it's not supposed to be like a long discussion. You often will have those either every day or every 2 days. So usually like when I get in, I check the build first of all and make sure that I'm synced up to the most recent version of the build. So that's the game, but like the in progress game. That usually takes a little while. So I let that run in the background, check Messenger to see if anybody has pinged me. I generally, check a couple of websites. What's coming out? What's new? Is there any up-to-date news or reviews? I'll look at what my current tasks are. It kind of varies from moment to moment when you're in a project, but generally you'll have either a list of tasks in Jira, which is kind of like our bug tracking, task tracking software, or I'll have my own list. I'll be like, either I'm writing documents or I'm doing bugs, or I'll look kind of the highest priority stuff and then I'll just start working on it. And then obviously go to various meetings. Sometimes you'll have weekly reviews where it's like, okay, we're going to review the build for an hour. So we get together, we bring the build up in a meeting room and we play through it and look at what's new for the week and what's different. Let's play around with it. Oh, this feature, this attack doesn't work as well as it should. They're planning days. So, everybody's planning for the next sprint. Sprint is like basically like a 2 to 3 week chunk of time. It's kind of meant so that you don't have like a really long time before your next deliverable. You have like a short period of time. And it's like within the next 2 weeks, I'm planning on delivering this, this, and this, and that will be your task. So you generally need a planning day where you figure out what those are going to be. Most of the time you just spend either at your desk working on your task or you'll have meetings.
It's good to familiarize yourself with terms like Scrum and Sprint, especially for those considering jobs in tech. Next, I wanted to learn more about the work hours. We've all heard the rumors about 100-hour work weeks. Here's what Victor had to say about working overtime.
That's the not so secret, dirty secret of the game industry is how much overtime people tend to do. Although, to be perfectly fair, like my experience at my most recent job has actually been quite good. I've not had that much OT.
So why is that?
It's good planning, basically planning ahead. Planners will actually do several days ahead of time to make sure that we have a good build for that cutoff date. You also have people who are aggressive in terms of managing scope. Scope is an industry term, which is basically like quantity of stuff. So it's like, if you have a game design team and it's like, we've done a projection and we realize that we don't have enough time to get all the features in that we want to get, a good manager will start cutting scope, trimming features or doing a risk assessment. Do we need this feature? No, we just don't have the time to do it. Let's cut it. A bad manager will be like, well, too bad. I guess you're all going to do OT until we cram all that stuff in. And of course, there are certain instances where there are things happen and whatever, just like in any industry. But I've seen teams and studios where they plan overtime into the plan. They'll be like, well, we don't have the money for 6 months, so let's just plan for 4 months. So, a good mitigation of scope is also really important. But to have that, they have to be willing to make those cuts. No game in the history of mankind has ever had all the features in it that it was supposed to have. Every video game, I swear, has had to cut something.
The point he's making here is that it's essential to have a manager that prioritizes the well-being of their staff. And now to one of my favorite questions. What do you love about your job?
I get to be creative and solve problems. It feels this really great feeling when you're given a problem. How are we going to make this control scheme work? Or how are we going to make this feature work? And I love that problem solving. I love it when you have, as a game designer, you have agency to kind of propose ideas, propose solutions, pitching features. And everybody has good ideas. I've had QA people, I've had programmers, I've had anybody say, why don't we do blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, oh my God, that's a great idea. And that got in the game. So the idea of being able to kind of come up with a creative solution to a problem, that's kind of my favorite part of it. I also just like it when people like my games.
Everyone has good ideas. I really like how Victor acknowledges his colleagues throughout this interview because it really is a team effort. And you want to be a part of that team? Listen up as Victor talks about the training that is required.
So, there are multiple schools that provide actual game development training. And the ones that you want to look for are ones that actually have people who are currently in the industry or who maybe have taken a bit of a break from the industry. But things evolve so quickly in the video game industry. I was a teacher 10 years ago at Art Institute of Vancouver, and things that I would have taught back then, I wouldn't teach now. Several of my coworkers on my team teach at Cégep Limoilou. There's a game design program there. So like reading on game design theory or watching videos on game game design theory or even classes on game design theory. Yes, they will be useful. Anything adjacent to game design is also really useful. Art, if you can do some art, if you can do some programming. But I think honestly, one of the best things, just try tinkering in game engines. Don't go like, oh, I'm going to make a brand new game. Just try tinkering, just play. There's all the main game engines that are out there nowadays. Unreal, Unity, they're free for access. They're free for anybody. Go on, download it, and jump in the editor and start making stuff. And there is a ton of resources online for people to learn how to make games. If you want to get in game design in the industry, a lot of the stuff you learned just through experiencing it. I'm in the editor and I'm trying to get this character to move and it doesn't work. And I figure it out and I'm like, okay, I understand how now a loco set works. I understand how animation transitions work. Oh, I understand how hurt reactions. And Unreal is just ridiculous. It's so powerful. It's got game design tools, it's got animation tools, camera tools. I think there's a lot of training that can just be done by self-motivating and doing it yourself if it's something you're interested in. And yeah, you can go to school for it. It will definitely get you a head up. Like we have multiple interns at Ubisoft from Cégep Limoilou. So they got an internship directly from the game program at Cégep Limoilou over to Ubisoft. And a lot of them, once their internship's over, Ubi liked them. They're like, would you like to keep working? School is good. But I think that doing kind of your own thing in an editor is going to teach you the most because you're learning by doing.
No matter what career you're embarking on, if there's an opportunity to do an internship, go for it, because it often leads to jobs. Next, I ask him about how often he uses English at work.
As an Anglophone, I use it all the time. It's a little different now that we're on work from home, just because I think people speak more French. But my studio, I generally can use English and people will understand me. There's only been a few instances where I've had a coworker who didn't quite kind of communicate well in English. So I opted to shift to French to kind of help facilitate that communication. I know a couple of studios work primarily in French, but generally English is kind of accepted in the game industry as like the standard. At least at UB, they understand that to be an international studio, you have to be willing to accept people who don't speak French, because most people here, especially in the game industry, everybody in the game industry really can speak English and French. All our documentation is in English. And like, for example, there have been some instances where we've had an all hands meeting. They tend to do those in French, and then they'll have like earpieces for people who speak English. But, when we have kind of more studio level meetings, they'll actually do two. They'll do an English meeting and a French meeting. I don't necessarily recommend being only English. I feel like it's important to be bilingual here in Quebec City in general, just because there shouldn't be an expectation that everybody can interact with you in English. The same reason why I wouldn't go to Beijing and expect everybody to speak English to me, right? I've been here for 2 and a bit years now, and I was in French immersion my entire school life. So personally, I feel comfortable now in both languages, but if people are aware that you're an Anglophone, they're pretty good about it.
Final question. What advice do you have for high school students?
Don't just play one game and don't play one type of game. Try single player game, try multiplayer games, try mobile games. There's so many games that you can get now for free or super cheap. I think it's really important as a game designer to be well-rounded and understand a wide variety of games. Every game has value regardless of whether you like it or not. I can learn something from a bad game. I can learn something from a good game. I can learn something from a game I hate, even though it's quote unquote good. There's always stuff that you can learn from video games. And that's something that a good game designer should be doing, is always pulling information from other titles. You don't have to play everything, but at least if you understand it, if you want to be a good artist or a good creator, a good creative person, you need to draw inspiration from everything in your life, not just one thing. So try to get a wide variety of music, of movies, of TV shows, of books, of games, because anything can inspire you or help you come up with solutions. The other thing I would say is that when you do play games, try to deconstruct them or try to think about how they were made. Try to break them down a little bit. When you're playing a shooter, how does that camera move? Does it move quick? Does it move slow? How do you zoom in? How fast do you move? Why does this game have this button layout and this game have this button layout? They're both shooters. Why do they have such different layouts? Is it because the developers wanted to create different feeling? Even just the controller layout can change the feeling of a game, right? So be inquisitive about games, because you need to have that kind of understanding of why a game developers chose to do something the way they did. When you get kind of in that mindset of understanding how something is actually made, it changes your mentality about how you approach something.
And that's all for this episode. Thank you again to our guest, Victor Cameron, for sharing his insights. We would also like to acknowledge the Government of Canada for funding this initiative. Join us next time for our talk with Joanne Lavallée about working as a technical writer. This is the Pathways Podcast. Signing off. Until next time.